Alan, good to see you. How are you?
Nice to see you.
So, for those people who don't know, Alan is a food and drug lawyer, just like myself, and we've connected multiple times. And he's been a guest on this podcast before. It's been fun, and we're actually having another podcast on what has the first 18 months under Trump been like. Where does it lead us? What is it going to look like? And you seem to know more about the stuff than I do. So, tell me more about what's been going on with Trump. What do you think are the big highlights that you've been advising your clients about?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's always enjoyable. The FDA, like the rest of the Trump administration, is sort of a interesting day by day, half day by half day kind of situation. Commissioners come and go, center directors come and go, and so that's it's a little ever evolving. How about that? Not quite like a UFC match, but certainly challenging. We'll just say it that way. I've done this for 33 years, just food and drug law, and it's certainly been, I would say, challenging in many ways for clients, and I would say also for the FDA. From the FDA side, it's not a secret that DOGE and Elon Musk knocked out a lot of good people, and who either left because they were let go or RIFT, the reduction in force, or they left because they just did not feel as committed as they were, or they just felt they were not appreciated, and they either took early retirement. When you have that kind of issue, I think you have a morale issue. You certainly have a resource or lack of resource issue, and you have a kind of a lack of experience issue. I think that there's something when you lose experience and sometimes common sense and relationships. And I think morale is not great. And so I think that that's an FDA issue. And as a result, that becomes somewhat of an industry issue. Some specific areas, if I may, if we look, let's say, prescription drug promotion, we've certainly seen more enforcement or more letters, notice of violations, sometimes referred to as untitled letters, or warning letters that are sent to drug companies because of unlawful promotion. And there's been a particular focus on direct-to-consumer advertising. In a given year, when you and I were young pups, you might see 10, 15 letters, and yet now we're seeing that that can be in a half of a year, and even late last year we saw several issued in one day, where FDA was able to use AI, or at least everyone thinks that they used AI to look at certain materials very quickly. I think that's a little bit of indicative of Senator Kennedy and certain members of Congress who have had concerns about direct-to-consumer advertising and some skepticism or cynicism about the pharmaceutical industry. Certain things in the food space, Make America Healthy Again, food areas, dietary supplements, maybe even in the exosomes areas or peptides, we've certainly seen at least policy statements issued by Senator Kennedy or the commissioner talking about alternatives or challenging certain beliefs or certain things that the agency had done in the past, whether or not it was COVID treatments, whether or not it's autism, certain things that I think that the agency had dispelled certain concerns or had raised the bar in some areas. And this administration, I do think that we've seen with this administration, and I would say with other administrations, often there will be a policy or an initiative that doesn't necessarily get executed. I don't want to call it merely a bumper sticker, but it's not difficult for a politician or a secretary or a president to say this should be a focus. And then when you get to the worker bees, they either don't do it at all or maybe slow walk it or what have you. So, it's a little bit like the Seinfeld episode, anyone can make a reservation, but it's the hold. Anyone can sort of make a proclamation. It doesn't necessarily need to be executed. That's one of the reasons why, I think, to use your phrase, the magic 8 ball, it's difficult to sort of determine where we'll be tomorrow, where we'll be Wednesday and Thursday. Because again, policies or at least initiatives can be posted on FDA's website. We're going to look into this, we're going to look into that. Doesn't necessarily mean that it actually happens. As it relates to enforcement, I would say more on the manufacturing side. I think I haven't really done a numbers crunch, but it feels as though there's been a lot more enforcement ex-US, certainly about products being held up at the border. We certainly have seen that with clients, API manufacturers, where there have been quality issues in certain countries, China, India, et cetera. We also have some clients who are ex-US based, particularly in the OTC space, where there have been more, I won't call them virtual inspections, but there have been requests by email where FDA has a laundry list of things that they want to see because they can't get to certain countries because of either war and strife or budgets or whatever. And they'll basically say, okay, Darshan Pharmaceuticals, we want to see the following things. It's as though FDA was doing an inspection, but they're not physically on site, and then they're allowing the company to respond, over time. So we've seen more of that, again, particularly in the OTC space. So I would say it's a lot of stuff I've thrown out there, but what I would say is a little bit more focus on the consumer from a direct-to-consumer and OTC, OTC drugs, OTC medical devices, dietary supplements, products that consumers can get more quickly than, let's say, prescription-wise. Whether you want to call that paternalistic, and if that's a good word or it's a bad word, I do think that there is maybe a cynicism or skepticism of some in senior roles at FDA and in HHS that are maybe doubtful of some of the industry, and therefore the agency either needs to get the industry to lighten up.
The original FDA, when I think of it, and original as in 2 years ago, but it sort of took the role that, patient safety is more important. Mm-hmm. I would argue that now they've sort of shifted into innovation is more important. And I'm not judging that for one way or the other, but I would argue that that is the new perspective.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I think a little bit, I think in general you see that with the Republican administration, it's just a philosophy
right.
Of less regulation. Encumbers innovation and creativity, and so it's all these regulations that are stopping innovation. So we need to open it up and sort of let the industry act responsibly, and versus, let's say, in general, Democrats are probably a little bit more government oversight, government regulation, and certainly this administration, both as the president being very pro-business. And I think Secretary Kennedy being more of a alternative, outside the box, maybe distrustful of a past FDA and or industry.
Find related podcasts below.
I think DOGE neutered the ability for the FDA to do that exact sort of, we're going to be more innovative, but we're going to be more cautious. 10 minutes ago, that the IRS went from 100,000 employees to something like 70,000, or if not less.
Right.
Which means that they've lost the ability to enforce the rules. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not really rooting for the IRS to be
I understand.
I would argue that to the unusual strategies you're talking about, it reminds me of the UFC in the front lawn, in that it's extremely non-traditional. I can't tell you what's wrong with it, because why not? Yeah. But on the other hand, it just seems like the wrong tone. But is that just because I'm used to something?
I think you're right, and I think you've got two things. One is I think you've got government people basically attacking FDA as an institution, and therefore it's lawyers kind of joke about lawyer jokes and all of that, because we'll sometimes say we're laughing all the way to the bank, okay? But these are FDA officials. Well, most are good. There's some that are probably not as good, but they could probably make double, if not a triple, what they want in industry. But they're doing this because they truly believe in something, and to be attacked by their own bosses, if you will, or by the president, or by it's just not good for morale. And so there is one thing. And then I think that there's also the idea of trying to letting go so many people, not necessarily increasing funding, saying we're going to do more with less. And the danger with that, and sometimes it can work, and that's certainly every institution or organization tries to be more efficient. Law firms are no exception. But you want to be careful that you don't cut to the bone, and or that you are telling the staff you have to work faster because there's, our philosophy is to get more products out there, and there's less of it. And so our reviewers feeling pressure to sign off on things faster or to come up with policies faster than they might have done. I don't know. Industry is getting bigger. More applications are coming in. More people are making products. It's an international industry. Okay. And so I just think that there's a lot of demands on an institution that's being attacked and, is being asked to do more with less. And while we hope that that's not going to result in some major, issue, there is a little bit of that concern some people are afraid of, and that a lot of good people, and that people will also maybe not be interested in joining the FDA because of sort of the hit that it's taken. Is this a place, even if I wanted to go there, am I going to be looking over my shoulder, either because I'm going to get let go or because somebody more senior is going to, veto my view. Previous commissioner was known, had stated that, he got more involved in certain decisions that I don't think previous commissioners had done. The uncertainty makes industry uncomfortable. It's no different than Wall Street. When Wall Street has more certainty, it'll either go up or it'll go down. It's when things are not certain. I mean, we only have to look at recent issues, with Iran. Okay, one day we're going to have a peace, and then all of a sudden we're not going to have it, and the market's going up and the market's going down. Okay, or things about NVIDIA, and if NVIDIA has a bad quarter, all of a sudden does that mean everybody else is going to have a bad quarter? And that's when the market gets nervous because they don't have certainty. And I think that's also what happens to industry. Is they're kind of like, well, they're saying X, but I'm working on Y. Is that an opportunity? Is there an opportunity because there's a new FDA? Or am I going to, get screwed? Okay. And so all I can tell, clients is you can complain about it, say it's good, bad, or indifferent. It doesn't really matter. All I can tell them is here's where we are today. As of Monday, these are the rules. Okay. Could it change Tuesday? I guess. Okay, but let's assume it doesn't. Okay, and and FDA is not going to change everything overnight. And so let's always remember safety, efficacy, and quality. Okay, when it comes to manufacturing and getting product approval, if it's advertising promotion, truthful, not misleading. Don't promote off-label. Be truthful and not misleading. If it's clinical data, typically 2 adequate and well-controlled studies, although now we obviously know that there can be 1. Go with the tried and true that's lasted, since 1906, and be prepared for hiccups along the way.
I mean, we saw the Make in America push that happened early in the administration. I haven't heard as much about it right now, but I can't tell my clients are not sort of importing the products in the same way. So what are your clients? What are the general trends you're seeing? And of one?
Well, we have seen some clients, more larger companies, that are setting up shop or building more in the United States, a new plant or things like that, which of course is, I think, a nod to the current administration, sort of America first, and all the benefits that go with that. And conversely, I won't say the non-benefits, but the potential implications of not. Certainly the U.S. market has always been the largest market. So whether it's for economics or because of political pressures, I think we've seen, that. I will get questions about more. We have manufacturing facilities overseas, and because they are having issues with FDA, whether or not it's because they've always had issues with FDA, whether that was this administration or past because of quality issues, or because FDA may be holding up these products more because not America first, we need to start thinking about setting up an alternate supplier in the United States or building something in the United States. And what do we need to think about from an FDA perspective? Registration, listing, GMP. That's how those issues are coming to me. More about the concerns of having an ex-US partner or an ex-US manufacturing facility and FDA's view about that, and how should they deal with it from a regulatory perspective, less corporate tax tariff focused.
Is it more in the I'm gonna wait for things to stabilize? Is it more that we're going to start bringing products back to the U.S.? Is it more we've already brought products and we're looking for more suppliers?
Yeah, I think it's more difficult for smaller companies that frankly have limited, they don't have the money, they don't have the infrastructure. So if they set up a U.S. shop, it's more for distribution, it's more for business development, but they're really not saying, hey, if I'm ex-US, I need to set up something in the United States because of, Buy America or America First. Their attitude is, it's all we can do to keep our clinical trial funded and to get investments. And so while they may think about it down the road, they're kind of counting their pennies now because they've got it here and now. I think a larger company has the flexibility and maybe more of the resources to think more about kind of the America First concept.
Follow our page on LinkedIn.
More and more people talk about Australia recently. And I've seen, come to Australia, we'll do this. And then Europe is going, okay, we may have pushed too far in this whole data thing. Are you seeing US companies go, I don't want to go outside the US because it's just more stuff to deal with, or it's worth it because we're dealing with a global audience?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think when companies, I guess what I would say is ex-US companies, I think are looking more at that US versus ex-US, whether that's in Australia or Europe or Asia versus the US, because again, while the US may be the ultimate market, if I can get some wins, if you will, or it's not as laborious to go to South Korea or Australia or EU or name your region, and I can get some sales, and then I can get some data, and then come to US, they're going to do that. That's just, to them, good business. I think it depends on the product, and I mean product that could be drug, device, biologic, and I think to some extent it may also depend within that what type of product, what type of medical device, what type of drug, what type of biologic, if you will. We've certainly seen more of, and this just may be the nature of our practice, we've certainly received more ex-US work in food lately, where they're asked, ex-US companies, it may just be we've developed a little bit more of a niche with certain countries, and so we're getting referrals. I think that's just, again, doing business in the United States. So I think companies are always looking at the regulatory landscape for any area, particularly ex-US, and I would also say kind of smaller companies. Again, if they can work in parallel, that's big pharma and big device companies can work in parallel. But again, if I only have so much money, I have to sort of figure out where can I get the biggest bang for my buck. I use a baseball analogy. I say sometimes you can go for the home run, and that's exciting if you get it, and fireworks go off, and loud music goes on the goes in the stadium. But there's only one way to hit a home run, and yours truly, who's 5'8", 5'9", and heels, is not going to hit a home run anytime soon. Okay, but there's about 10 ways now to get to first base. So maybe at least I get in the game. Okay, and then I can go base to base. So sometimes I tell my client or tell our clients, it may be more methodical and it may even be longer, okay, long term to get the holy grail, but at least I'm in the game, and then I can go base to base to base. Even let's say 510K, I can make my product, if I get it cleared, I can make that the predicate. Or if it's a new drug application, I can come in with a supplemental application. I go base to base to base versus trying to go for the home run. And I think, I would say that whether you're a small company, a large company, but I would also say that to a company outside the United States to try to figure out, is it better to try to go this Buy America or get an America First versus an ex-US region? I said a lot there, but I just wanted to give you sort of how I would advise a client.
Yeah. What is your take right now with that exact US ex-US with the perspective of China specifically?
Yeah, you may follow this more than me. What I've noticed is that a lot of companies are seemingly doing business with, Asian biotech companies. Okay, where U.S. companies are doing a deal with, whether that's China or Korea, those companies, whether or not it's that they are supporting. Since I'm not, a corporate lawyer, I don't know how much of it is, Minsk engages with, Darshan and Asia to try to develop products, Asian products for ultimate U.S. And we'll let you do all the hard lifting, but we'll fund you because maybe the regulatory processes or I don't know, maybe it's cheaper to do it. I'm not really sure. So I guess I'm not seeing companies not do business. They seem to be doing a lot of licensing or development businesses. Since I don't know the terms of the contracts, I'm not exactly sure which way that's going. I certainly would say where I would agree with you, not that I would disagree with you on the other, but what I guess I would say is certainly there is a perception, right or wrong, I don't want to judge, that APIs made in China or sometimes in India or other regions are not quite up to snuff when it comes to FDA. And so many companies may be resistant to set up, to rely on an API manufacturer in China or setting up clinical trials in China because of either quality related issues, which existed this administration, or because of the existing administration and sometimes the political tug of war that the U.S. has with China, they would be kind of caught in the middle, being blacklisted or getting all kinds of hurdles thrown at them or what have you. But I guess I haven't seen it go down to zero because I guess I feel like I'm seeing, at least in the news, where U.S. companies are doing deals with Asian companies. I can't recall if they're China-centric, but I think many are, particularly in the biologics area.
So I'll give you my perspective because it's been a sharing both ways. What I found interesting is I've seen a lot of work from Japan recently, and I've seen a lot of work from China, but they're out licensing stuff from China. And things like the Biosecure Act is making me go, okay, so how do I share pharmacovigilance data back to China? Because that's going to be part of the terms of use and part of the licensing terms. So it's become more complicated.
Yeah.
And there's a recognition that you have to share this data, but it's unclear how it's going to play out long term. So Alan, before we let you go, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Email Alan, ALAN, .minsk, MINSK, Alan, G as in George.com. You can always, reach me by LinkedIn, but you got my email address. Phone number is 404-873-8690.
Thank you, Alan, for being on. This was awesome.
Thank you.
And I look forward to doing more of these.
I always enjoy it.
Call, click, or email.